Hello, I'm Brett Grohsgal of Even Star Organic Farm, and we grow a lot of brassicas during the winter. Next, please. From an operations standpoint, we grow about 25 acres of crops in the winter. Our farm is over 100 acres. We grow that many acres outside, about 20 or 25 acres outside. We have 3 greenhouses as well. Our winter crops are usually planted in September. They sometimes will go into early October, and then they're harvested throughout the winter. Our greenhouses provide no more than 30 to 40% of our total production. Next. Why do we grow these? We grow our winter crops because they're free outside, because they're freeze hardy. They're really adapted to open fields. Yes, we use our greenhouses, but those are mostly for lettuces and herbs like cilantro and parsley. In the open fields, that's where we really focus on the brassicas. Next. Okay, this lists the various, most of the crops we grow during the winter. You can see how heavily brassicaceae it is. Lettuces we do both outside and inside. Outside meaning open field. Open field lettuces typically die early or they don't taste good. Our outside grown, our open field brassicas really are superior in flavor to the same brassicas grown in our greenhouses. Next, please. So we grow many types of brassicas during the winter. Lettuces we do both in the greenhouses or in one greenhouse and outside. We also do experimental crops. The experimental crops rarely do as well as brassicas. Next, please. Okay, we are a lot warmer than most Canadian farmers. We are zone 7B. That's one reason we can do outdoor production through the winter. So in Fahrenheit, we're not very cold. However, our winds are fierce and wind chill is real. Anyone who works outside in the winter knows wind chill is real, and it's real to plants. So unfortunately, we don't get enough snow. Snow is a really good thing. It protects crops from desiccation. We don't get enough. We get more ice or bare ground. We don't use much fertilizer. We use 1/5 of what we're legally permitted to use in Maryland. We also cover crop with competitors, clover, vetch, Austrian winter pea. Yeah, those are the 3. So our plants, our cash crops have to compete with leguminous cover crops that add nitrogen for the following summer's crops. So we're a certified organic farm, and that means we really don't use a lot of synthetic fertilizer, or not synthetic. We don't use much purchased fertilizer. And we stopped heating our greenhouses in 2008 to reduce our carbon footprint. So technically, they're not greenhouses anymore. They're hoop houses. Next, please. This is a nice shot of late October or early November. You see the different colors of the greens. The pale green yellow is fungen, also called Maruba Santo. There's collards there, there's mustards. This is one of our better fields. And then off in the distance, there's a hay field that we also own. We have other fields, but this is a pretty shot to show the type of flat land we have. Next, please. Ah, that's pretty. This is snow. Snow is my friend. Underneath there are crops that are very, very happy because they're protected. Now, if it were purchased brassica seed instead of something we had bred, it might not be so happy. But the crops we have bred here, and I started breeding these in 1992, I think. Yes, 1992. Though the farm began in 1996. The crops we have here, they've been through so many winters that snow is welcome. Next, please. Okay, what could northern growers do? Because you're so much colder than we are. In the open fields, Quebecois or other Canadian growers could certainly have a longer season in the fall, and if you had survivors, an earlier start to the April or the March markets. But in greenhouses, that's where northern growers could really benefit, because fuel is cheap right now. It won't always be cheap. So heating a greenhouse really adds up. I mean, I know we used to heat our greenhouses. So the quickest way to maximize your dollar revenue for winter brassicas in greenhouses is to minimize your heating cost. I'm assuming your market is good. If you can sell all you grow, you don't have to worry about the revenue, but you do have to worry about your expenses. You can also, and we have also bred brassicas that do very well in greenhouse environments. And greenhouses are different. They have more fungal issues, more problems. They often have salt concentration. So you can breed brassicas that are tailored for greenhouse or even hoop house production. Next, please. If you're going to breed in a greenhouse or a hoop house, you really need to think about it. You need to plan well, and you need to do that when you plant your greenhouses. Again, for us, we are in a hurricane district or a hurricane region. So we plant our greenhouses late. We plant them October 10th, maybe October 1st, if it's a mild hurricane year. Why? Because a hurricane can wipe out a greenhouse, and has on our farm a couple times. So we plan early, we plant late, and we want to be sure that that greenhouse space is free for that crop to be both harvested, not destructively, and it can reside in that bed, in that greenhouse, until photoperiod has induced flowering and seed set. And that takes a while. That's April. So again, we have fungal pathogens in greenhouses. We have salt concentrations from irrigation water in greenhouses. This is the perfect environment to breed for tolerance to some bacterial and many fungal pests, and definitely for adverse soil conditions. However, the real problem with greenhouse breeding or hoop house breeding is your population size is a lot smaller. So you can't do big populations in greenhouses unless you have massive greenhouses. Next, please. Okay, so why should we even bother to breed? I spend all winter outside. My workers and I are cold all the time, or at least most of the time, especially when the rain comes down and it's starting to freeze on your skin. It's misery. Why should I breed? Why should I go to that extra work? The reason to do it is because what we breed is so much better than what I can buy. So later on, you may see a slide of a disease we have throughout the US. It's called Xanthomonas campestris. Hopefully you don't have it in Canada. I suspect you do. You'll see purchased seed versus seed we've bred. I can't buy seed as good as what we grow or what we've bred. And that said, I still spend a fair amount of money on purchased seed for winter production, but I do not assume it's going to produce as well. Purchased seed is also not adapted to our farm or to our region. It is very adapted to California. Purchased seed is dominantly bred in the United States for the huge production area that is California. I know that. I was a Berkeley graduate and I lived in California for 6 years. It's about California production. Finally, saving seed and breeding saves us money in the long haul. It certainly generates more revenue, not from seed sales. My royalty payments, the royalty payments we get from our seed are nothing. They're 1/500th of total farm revenue. But what the winter seed does is it lets our farm produce throughout the winter, and purchased seed won't do that. Next, please. Okay. We do use some hybridization. I have gotten away from that since we did our first crosses. What we're really addicted to is recurrent mass selection. It's an old, proven, wonderful technology, and it's very farmer friendly. It's been what farmers have done for thousands of years, thousands. Probably the first wheat was recurrent mass selection. Almost all the brassicas grown in coastal regions in the Far East, namely Korea, Japan, China, as well as brassicas grown in the Mediterranean hundreds of years ago, it was all recurrent mass selection. They were not doing hybridizations. I would promise you that. But what recurrent mass selection has that other breeding paths don't have, large initial populations, and then you want to have mortality, a harsh real-life screen. The screen is like, it kills things. That's what you want. And you want intentional mortality. Somebody's got to die for recurrent mass selection to work. In fact, for me, I don't mind seeing 97% mortality in the first year. Next, please. Okay. After the screen has done its job, after you've had mortality, the survivors, they're the ones that might get to breed. They get to have sex. That's a good incentive if you're a plant for survival. We select, after the survivors have survived, we try to rogue out the weak. We try to let disease, we try to destroy anything that is not really superior. We then let those plants they're both superior and they've also made it through winter. We plant those seed the next year, the next season. Next season to me is not it's not a spring planting. It's always going to be a September, October planting. By planting that seed, we're going to have a diminished mortality for every year that we do this, unless we get some horrible cataclysmic event, like a winter that goes down to 40 below in Fahrenheit. So the harsh recurrent means it happens every single year. The harsh screens return, the cycles continue, but mortality usually decreases over time. And this really gets that whole population into a very adapted landrace. And the landrace is what I'm after. And it can be heterogeneous. It does not have to be homogeneous. Okay, we choose the seed from a reliable source, preferably not hybrids. Our farm has done dehybridizations. I don't recommend it for beginners. It's not that hard, but it takes a lot of time. We choose appropriate varieties of the Brassicaceae. Kales, arugula, Chinese thick stem mustard, New Star mustard. Not all even star lines are sold through Fedco. Only 2 are sold through Fedco. You don't have to buy them. You can start with whatever your favorite Brassica is. There's plenty to choose from. Ones that I don't like are ones with hard seed pods, like radishes, radishes are a hassle. They're a pain to thrash the seed. And then we direct sow as large a population as you possibly can. And we don't like transplanting. Transplanting disturbs the main root of a plant, and I think induces higher mortality. If you can direct seed, do so. Okay, we treat normally with irrigation and fertilizer. We don't baby the crops. We never do destructive harvesting of superior plants. It is very tempting as a market grower to destructively harvest, because I can sell that whole plant, a plant that this is a bad plant, but I can sell the whole plant. But once I sever here, it's not going to be, it can't ever have sex again. It's over. And then we rogue freely. We like to kill the bad types. And then we let winter happen. And winter's going to happen. Next. Okay. In the spring, we kill all the weaklings as we can, as many as we can. That's paternal selection. We're controlling or influencing how much pollen, even from weak plants, hits our mother plants. And then we let the remaining superior plants form the new population. And we harvest seed from the most superior mother plants. That's maternal selection. So the typical thing I do with my workers is I will, and I only use trusted workers for this, I will say harvest all the arugula plants that at ground level, the stem is this thick, or let's say this thick. Anything below that, anything less thick, don't harvest. That's maternal selection, because we use thickness at ground of the stem as an approximator, as an estimate for a strong plant. And that's a pretty safe bet. It certainly has worked for us. If I said harvest everything, as most seed commercially is done, you're doing no maternal selection, except for what winter gave you. I want another step of selection. Next, please. Okay, there are some other forces in winter breeding. There are fungal diseases, especially in greenhouses, but in any poorly drained soil. Rhizoctonia and phoma are problems. I'm sure Canadians have their own soil-borne diseases or foliar diseases. They're really rough stuff. The way we handle that is we actively destroy those plants before any flowering occurs. And we also, because I'm a commercial farmer, I also try to reduce the chemical stresses. So again, in greenhouses, we have salt accumulation. I want to reduce salt in my greenhouses, and we let rainfall do that in the off season. Next, please. Okay, this is Xanthomonas campestris on a purchased seed of red turnip. It's a really good turnip for production, but it's very susceptible to Xanthomonas. So there's Xanthomonas campestris on a purchased seed of a red turnip. There's Xanthomonas campestris on a purchased Shanghai pak choi. Shanghai does great for us, but it's very vulnerable to Xanthomonas. And then we have Even Star Chinese thick stem mustard. That's the thick stem. Much less Xanthomonas on it. It's almost sellable. This leaf's not quite pretty enough, but it's almost sellable. And then we also have New Star mustard, which is an accidental cross of two of our mustards. It was a hybridization event. Now it's a stabilized landrace, and very little Xanthomonas. This is the most tolerant to Xanthomonas brassica we grow. Next, please. Okay, that's Xanthomonas. It's very unpleasant. I hope you don't have it. You probably do. Let's stop talking about it. It makes me sad. Next, please. Okay. We don't do spring-sown brassicas, maybe 3 acres, always turnips or radishes. They just don't do well in our region. As an organic grower that uses minimal fertilizer, I can't control the insect pests. So none of the stuff I'm talking about now pertains to spring-grown brassicas. In Canada, you probably have many, many spring-sown brassicas. I can't deal with that. Please go. Please do next. Okay, this is an arugula. This is our arugula. I saw inbreeding depression, or what I suspected was inbreeding depression, in the early 1990s. I crossed my mother's Italian heirloom arugula, one that she'd saved the seed of forever, that was wonderfully flavored, but I suspected inbreeding depression. I crossed that with an open pollinated Turkish arugula. And that cross, that hybridization event, was then stabilized since 1993. Stabilized year after year, winter after winter after winter. It's uniform only in its winter hardiness, its flavors, and its vigor. It doesn't, all leaves don't look alike. That arugula is tough. I would not want to meet it on a dark city street. Next, please. Okay, this is to the left is our Even Star arugula, probably October or November. It needs to be thinned because that's too crowded for winter. It won't survive real cold. So that needs to be thinned. You can see it's not very deeply green. It shows you we're using less nitrogen than most farmers would use. Now to the right, there's the same gene line, our ice spread arugula. That's in flower. That's probably a early April flowering. And you notice it's greener, darker green. That's because it has been scrounging for nutrients through the winter. And we've been harvesting leaves from it selectively, not the whole plant, not even most of the plant, but we'll harvest 40 to 60% of leaves per harvest every 5-6 weeks. Next, please. Okay, oh, that was backwards. So let's go to the next. Okay, population sizes. We really like to start big outside in a greenhouse, which Canadian farmers may have to use for breeding. About 2,000 plants as your starting population per gene line is about what you can do. For our type of production, where we don't like to overcrowd, but we're also not growing cabbages, which take a lot of room, a greenhouse bed 4 feet by 90 foot would give you 2,000 plants. You get 5 such beds per greenhouse. Our greenhouses are 96 foot by 30 foot. An open field, I want 40 to 80,000 plants out there per gene line. Our arugula is often at 100 to 120,000 plants growing at any one time outside. Go ahead, next, please. Okay, for me, recurrent mass selection is such a powerful tool because you have a diverse, heterogeneous population with many, many different expressions of genes and many, many different genes, especially important for winter and for diseases. Anything under 50 mother plants to form your base population would make me very nervous, and I would question the efficiency of that. We usually harvest between 200 and 10,000 superior mother plants per gene line during the spring. In a greenhouse, it may be as little as 50 plants, but anything under 50, keep me out of that game. That's not me. Okay, and that's what really makes that's what really enables recurrent mass selection to be powerful. You are starting with large populations, things get killed, things die because that's real life, and then you end up hopefully with a large enough population to still have differential expression of adapted genes. Next, please. Okay, Chinese thick stem mustard, ours. Now the term is a horned mustard. They develop a thick stem or a horn. This one doesn't have its horn yet, under conditions of cold and high fertility. I don't fertilize, our farm doesn't fertilize very heavily, so you're not going to see as much of the horn this early in the year. I'm presenting to you in January. We start to see a substantial horning, where it gets really thick in late February. Okay, we had purely recurrent mass selection, no crossing, no hybridization. That was intentional. We had 100% more winter mortality with the first 2 provenances. That's pretty bad. With 100%, you don't have any survivors. The third provenance, we had 30% survival, but it was a mild winter. Since then, we've been doing recurrent mass selection every year. We now have 0% mortality, unless we have a very warm fall. They flower. That's like they flower, and then real cold comes. That's when they die. If you flower prematurely and then you get January or February real cold, you're going to probably be dead in most cases, and certainly most brassicas. So flowering is a dangerous thing. That looks like that's gotta be a March Chinese thick stem mustard. You see how it's already enlarged. The stem is already enlarged, and that stem, this part, is the sweetest, best part of that mustard. It's delicious. Next, please. Winter, that's a pretty happy plant. It's got snow covering its roots. That's Chinese thick stem mustard, probably a December photograph. Yeah, that would be December because I'm not seeing enlargement of the ribs. Next, please. Okay, we do some hybridization. Again, I'm not a big believer in hybrids. We grow some hybrids of purchased seed. I would stay away from hybrids for breeding purposes until you get more experience using open pollinated gene lines. Next, please. New Star mustard. That was the very spicy, very aggressive mustard. It was an accidental hybridization. My best forewoman and I found it in the fields among tens of thousands of Chinese thick stem mustard plants. We found a number of these individuals and we dug them up and we saw this is pretty cool. It also shows some tolerance to Xanthomonas, but it's very spicy. You have to really like mustard to eat that. Next, please. Okay, we're really addicted to genetic management. When I die, our arugula will take over this county, this region. Our arugula does not stop. It's an aggressive plant. It is so aggressive. Our genetic work for the summer, our breeding for tomato crops, makes us relatively more immune to the fungal and bacterial pathogens that hit our tomato crops. In the winter, our genetic work has made winter possible. Summer, you can be a good breeder and have marked economic success. For winter, it's almost required. That's it. Any questions? So it could be very intimidating, very scary to take on breeding if you're a farmer already concerned about paying your bills, paying your workers, selling all that you grow. Start out easy. Start with one crop you know you can sell or that you happen to love. I don't like to eat arugula, but I love to sell it. So arugula for me is a really easy crop to start with because I love selling it. I love it on our farm. I love it in the marketplace. You could start out with any brassica or almost any type of breeding as long as, or any crop, as long as it's something you're passionate about. And start out small. A good thing to do would be only 2,000 plants. The advantage to Brassica, and then obviously let your screen do its job. The advantage to the Brassicas is they love to outcross. They do not like to self-pollinate. That means that you don't have to worry about pollination as long as you have pollinators around. The plants want to outcross. They're going to do that work for you, assuming that you don't have other arugula that's of lower quality nearby. It's really safe. I would caution you that if you are going to do greenhouse or open field Brassica or Brassicaceae breeding, turnips will outcross with kale. Not all of them, and in a lower success rate, but they will, and I know it for true. So I know it because I've seen it. So the dividing line between the Brassica species, you have to be careful about that, because Brassicas are quite happy to have sex with someone that you don't think they should have sex with. So the way to manage that is to mow any flowering crops nearby that you think might cross. And for that, you have a tractor or a weed whacker or even a human being, or destroy any potential crossing contaminator. But on our farm, as an example, we only grow even star arugula these days. I don't want anyone else's arugula to maybe survive a mild winter and then have sex with my beautiful arugula. So if you're going to breed, start with one crop, try to keep it a simple crop and a hardy crop, which again is arugula. It's also could be cherry tomatoes. It could be many, many different crops. I would not suggest mosh or claytonia. They'd be very difficult. And start out simple, start out smallish, and then grow into it. And good luck. And know that I really admire Canadian farmers. You grow great food. And I loved visiting Montreal. The food was amazing, both in the restaurants and in the farmers markets. Amazing. Right now, I can find Canadian produce in the restaurant wholesale houses in Washington, D.C. And I have some of that Canadian produce in my walk-in for my family to eat. That's it. Thank you.